On today's edition of the show, we're going to discuss the fallout from Game 2 as the series shifts to Sunrise, Florida. We're going to talk more about if Paul Maurice has figured out his playoff lines, and we're going to discuss more about the news and updates ahead of Game 3.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, April 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And don't forget to also subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And special shout out to all the everydayers who listen to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, because I want to thank you guys for joining me all throughout this season, and even for the people who just started being everydayers as the Florida Panthers make the playoffs for the fourth season in a row, and hoping to continue past these 2 weeks of round one. But the series does in fact shift to Sunrise, Florida on Friday night, and it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Nick Fairbanks is back, and Nick, welcome back to another edition of Fairbanks Friday.
Thanks for having me back, and we have a series. This is going to be a gritty, playoff style, old style series that we're going to have. And with how much I've been on Twitter today, I don't think the Boston fans are ready for it.
Yeah, I wonder that as well, whether it's, are they ready for it, are they not? Of course, going into Game 3, you know that the Bruins fans do travel well, so we can only understand that once the game does happen. I mean, just let's just talk about the first two games and just how you felt. I mean, what a difference between game 1 and 2, and then the Bennett factor coming in. He led all forwards with 150 hits, and something I didn't mention yesterday on yesterday's show is his ability to stand up for a teammate too. And it goes back to the cross check that Tyler Bertuzzi had on Aaron Ekblad, and then Bennett is right there to stand up for his teammate, and then that forces a 4-on-4 situation for that game. But the Panthers, we don't really realize sometimes how missed Sam Bennett was, and to think that even before the whole Patrick Hornquist LTIR situation happened, there could have been and all the rumors was one of the Sams being trade bait because of keeping that promise to Hornquist. Just going from that to this and having a series, it's just incredible. And of course, fighting injuries too, because the last time Sam Bennett was out for an extended period of time and he came back, it was shortly after the trade deadline. That first game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, an offensive explosion for the Panthers, and Sam Bennett was a goal scorer in that game against the Pittsburgh Penguins on March 4th. So it's a little bit of a different jump and a different energy that the Florida Panthers do have when he's in the lineup.
Definitely is. And I'll say three things about this. Number one, we need to give Calgary another second-round pick for him. I will die on that hill. Too many. Second, I think Paul Maurice said it best, that he brings a different element. He's a play driver, and that was something that was missing from the second line. I mean, yeah, you have Tkachuk, and you have Verhaeghe that got moved down. They can be play drivers too, but Bennett is just what stirs the drink, basically. And, definitely saw what he was able to do last night. And this is the second time in the season that he's able to come back from injury. And as you said, be able to like impact the game immediately. And the third thing is it allows Paul Maurice to actually set his lineup and have equal distribution amongst the centers. I mean, I was talking with somebody on Twitter about Anton Lundell, my boy, and how he was, taking over second, line duties, looking a little bit overmatched and everything. And of course, this is his second year. He's still trying to round out offensively and everything. He's got the defense down just fine, but a lot was asked of him, and he's going to get there, just not right now. So Sam himself just provides that extra blanket of security and what he can bring not only to his line but what he brings to the team.
Yeah, and also when it comes to Bennett as well, his ability to get back. I mean, another thing is that he went 3/4 of the ice in the middle of the second period as well to stop a 4-on-2 opportunity for the Boston Bruins. I believe it was in the middle of the second period, and just stripped the puck, and then easily the Florida Panthers were on their way back in transition going the other way. And let's not forget that the transition game wasn't there in game one, and it all flipped on its ugly head. Well, at least for the Bruins, all in game two, and that is that right there. I know it's just one play that I'm listing out. It's just little things that you see from. I mean, we're 9 years removed from him being drafted 4th overall, so to possibly ship him out for a second-year player like you spoke about in Anton Lundell, where the matchups might not be favorable, you could have put yourself in really hot water down the rest of the season. I mean, who knows? The Florida Panthers might not have even been here. I know they finished the season without Sam Bennett. That I'm aware of, but also think about the different experiences, dimension, and of course, playoff Sam Bennett. I mean, it's not a lie. Average a point per game in 2021 in that postseason in the 6-game series against the Tampa Bay Lightning, except for playing one game where he got suspended for charging against Ross Colton. But his shooting percentage is up 1% from the regular season. That's something.
His game is attuned to playoff style. Okay, he's gritty, he's quick, he drives plays, he's not afraid to hit anybody, as you were saying. Yesterday, he was basically the one that set up the Verhaeghe goal. I mean, he was the one that put a hit on that got it to Tkachuk, and then Tkachuk laid it on Verhaeghe's stick, and that basically was the game right there. So think about it this way. Think about it from Boston's perspective. Would you rather run your team against the team that Florida put out in the first game or the second game?
I mean, first, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
So
because you have a team that's been put together, the lines that are put together that they probably haven't played, together for a long time. Your players are better and that they're better at their position, so you can dominate possession. And that's what Boston did. Boston basically played the Panthers perfectly. They kept everything to the outside and was able to dictate what they wanted to do. Insert Sam Bennett, the whole thing flips on its head, like you were saying. So it's going to be interesting what happens with game 3 and 4 here, because maybe Mr. Bergeron might not be here.
Yeah, and we'll discuss that more later in the show. But before we do, we're going to transition over to the second segment and talk more about whether Paul Maurice has figured out his lines of what he wants to put out there night in and night out for the rest of this 7-game series between the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins. We're going to discuss that next here on the show. But first, we're going to tell you all about eBay Motors. And for a championship team, it's about making sure that every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right for the first time around. Just add your ride to my garage and look for the green check so you know it will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right price on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Back on this second segment here on this April 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is another edition of Fairbanks Friday. Nick Fairbanks is back, and I wanted to dig more about the lines with that Paul Maurice has put together as of late. Well, not as of late. The adjustments that he made in game 2, made an adjustment with the top line, putting Duclair back on the third, and just put Rhino, and then it was Verhaeghe being shifted down to that second line with Bennett and Tkachuk, and when you look at how they did over the regular season, 5-on-5, a lot of time has been played together. And I also want to go back, all the way back to training camp, right before a preseason game was even played. The way Paul Maurice structured his lines was you get 2 guys together and then you add 1 other person on the wing and rotate it every single time. And he wanted to structure it in pairs for at least a good portion of practice to get used to each other. And a big one that I saw going all the way back to September was Bennett and Tkachuk. Of course, the familiarity going back to their Calgary days. So that's not a coincidence at all. But you think about, I look at these numbers with Verhaeghe, Bennett, and Tkachuk. Big sample size, 32 games together, 308 minutes over the regular season. A Corsi for of almost 60%, 59.3 to be exact. Shot on goal differential of plus 80. Goals for and goals for 22, goals against 11. So plus 11 on that on that line, just at 5-on-5. And then Etu, Barkov, and Rhino, 7 games played. Corsi for of 63%. Goal differential of plus 3 and plus 9 on shot on goal advantage. So do you think that Paul Maurice has figured it out what as far as how he wants his top 6?
I do. And it's all because these players that you just named have all had career years. Tkachuk had a career year. Verhaeghe had a career year. Unfortunately, Sam Bennett wasn't part of that, but he was one of the main drivers as the reason why they were able to have the seasons that they were. And now you have Eetu Luostarinen, who's basically exploded this season and has been a huge contributor, considering that this team doesn't have a lot of depth this season as compared to last season. And as you said, with Duclair coming back, I really do feel bad for him. It's unfortunate that he's going through this right now, as far as not being able to score, making mistakes that he is. But it's playoff time. We gotta be better. We gotta make better decisions and everything. So I think Maurice did make the good decision to drop him down to the third. I was actually wondering if Lomberg was going to go up, because Lomberg is just that plug and he'll play with anybody and make sure it gets going. But one thing I want to mention about the second line with Bennett, Tkachuk, and Verhaeghe. You have Bennett, like I said, that drives the play. You have Tkachuk that can hold the puck and that can cycle, right? You need somebody who's going to be able to put the puck on net, right? You have Verhaeghe there, who's got probably one of the best shots on the team. You have each player that does something a little bit different that can actually, contribute. And I don't think you could say that about any other line on the team. I mean, Barkov's going to be your defensive forward, but then he's got Eetu there. Etu's more like a defensive forward as well. His offense is coming around. And then you have Reinhart, who basically, I'm right there for the slot, or I can shoot. So the second line is the most complete line. And, for him to put that back together, it proved, true. So to answer your question, yes, I do think he found his 6.
Yeah, and I like what you said. I like what you said about Barkov and Etu's game being more defensive minded. So with Bennett, Verhaeghe, and Tkachuk each having a different thing to bring to the table, it helps produce that success that they had their 32 games played together at 5-on-5, and now Maurice, even if he doesn't go back to that immediately, in game 3, he knows that he can if the opportunity presents itself. And I'm a little concerned about Anthony Duclair because, I mean, the turnover that he had, the pizza that he tossed was on the power play when the Panthers were in their own zone. But Duke, look what happened before. He lost the board battle in the Boston zone and then comes back, but wins a battle.
Yes.
But throws it to no man's land there. But the thing is, it's not like last year where it could, because it's not like last year where the Panthers had, of course, a President's Trophy winning season, and you could insert someone right there for Anthony Duclair. Your only options are Giovanni Smith and Zach Dalpe for the Panthers as far as forwards. And Duclair, I don't think he's in a position to be scratched for this team. If you're gonna put Dalpe in for anyone, it's probably Colin White at this point right now. And Colin White, he had a pretty decent game 2 as well. He drew a penalty as well there, and he also had a screen for one of I believe one of Brandon Montour's goals as well. So Duclair is not in a position, in my opinion, to be scratched. So I kind of feel bad, but at the same time, it's you give him a chance with Barkov to give that speed element, but the finishing ability is not there for him. But also, Anton Lundell and Anthony Duclair haven't played a lot of time together as well.
Yep.
So that's a little bit of a tricky situation. But of course, but the fact that the Florida Panthers can beef up their top 6 I believe can help with Duclair's matchup as he's going against Boston's bottom 6, especially now that it's shifting to Sunrise and you get the last change. Hopefully this helps Duclair.
No, I think it will. And I think I brought this up, before he was coming back or even earlier in the season. I am concerned about how he's going to fit into this system. Florida's whole dynamic last year was run and gun speed. And that was his game. That's why he was able to spot like at least 30 goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see that in his game right now. The team needs more of a 5-team unit. They need to be able to play man-on-man defense. And on top of that, they need to win board battles. And right now, I'm having a really hard time seeing him be able to keep up with that. Hopefully, something does turn around for him. But, as you said, I don't think the Panthers have the luxury right now of putting somebody else in. But who knows? I mean, he could get a big goal tomorrow and change the whole narrative on this. Yep. I mean, that's how crazy the playoffs are, is that he may look this a certain way now, and then after tomorrow, it's all roses. So let's see what he does.
Look what happened in game 1 against Tampa last year after he got scratched in game 6. He scored.
Yep.
And if the puck didn't go touch the net and the referees didn't notice, Anthony Duclair could have had 2 goals, but of course that was reviewed for puck touching the net, and it was reversed as well. But also the Panthers as well, and they were very fortunate with the Bruins' lack of puck management as well in game 2. Panthers only had 5 giveaways. Bruins had 15 total in the game, especially in their own zone. I mean, credit to the Florida Panthers for being strong towards the half walls as well, creating those turnovers. I mean, we went back to mention Sam Bennett finishing his check on Charlie McAvoy that created that Verhaeghe goal, and that's what you need to continue to have if you want to have a chance, because the Boston Bruins, they can close up the neutral zone. They don't give up a lot of open passing lanes in the slot. I mean, yeah, it was in game 2, but you don't expect this type of game for Boston every single night out.
No, and a lot of people from Boston who cover the team said that was their worst game of the season. It only took them 84 games to have the worst game of the season. It works to the Panthers' benefit because guess what? Florida plays them the best this season. They're the only team that I think has beat them 3 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something either stylistically that the Panthers are doing that really gives Boston an issue, which I think it's the fact that they can both play the same way. It's whoever can control the neutral zone and who plays who has puck possession as well. So whoever basically wins those two battles right there has a better chance of winning the game.
No doubt, and that's really what has helped the Panthers as far as in that switch in game 2 that really helped them, especially exploding in the third period. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3. We're going to talk about the news of Patrice Bergeron for the Boston Bruins. We're going to give a Charlotte Checkers update, and we're going to discuss more about the game coming to the Panthers when having a lead and the difference that makes for teams in the postseason. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this April 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is another edition of Fairbanks Friday, and a little bit of an update on the Charlotte Checkers is they defeated the Lehigh Valley Phantoms in double overtime. 1 minute to go. Lucas Carlson gets the game winner. The Checkers were right on the doorstep. A few hacks at the Phantoms, and then the loose change comes towards Lucas Carlson, and he gets it passed in double overtime for the win. And Lehigh had 4 power play opportunities in the first period alone, and they scored on a 5-on-3. But man, the Connor Bunneman, who was part of the Claude Giroux trade, had a big block right before they scored on the 5-on-3. It was 10 seconds left in that 5-on-3, but still a great penalty kill for the Checkers. And then Connor Bunneman comes up and scores later in that game. Kali Shaline also gets on the board as well, 5th round pick from 2017 as well. I liked how Grigory Denisenko looked as well in that one. And of course, Lucas Carlson, I really have a good feeling he's going to be with the Florida Panthers come next year. I have a good feeling about it. But let's get to the news on the Boston side of things. So it was reported that Patrice Bergeron, there's a chance that he might not be traveling with the Boston Bruins. And Jim Montgomery, which was a little bit of weird wording, the way that I read the tweet. This is from Fluto Shinzawa of The Athletic. He said that he doesn't have an answer on if Patrice Bergeron will travel today. And Jim Montgomery said that he hadn't even talked to the doctors about whether Patrice Bergeron was going to travel. But then, Nick, Brian Boucher on the broadcast in the playoff games today says that word around NHL circles is that Patrice Bergeron didn't even travel with the Bruins for games 3 and 4. But how much do you buy the whole Jim Montgomery not even talking to his doctors, the team doctors, about Bergeron traveling?
Number one, it tells me 2 things. Number one, I think he trusts Bergeron enough to say, hey, I'm ready to go. I can play. Just because he is that organization and he has the trust and backing of that whole entire room. Secondly, he may have a more serious injury than what's being led on right now. So the fact that he wasn't able to even, he was sick, it probably was, and now he can't even travel. So what does that mean? Is it a lower body injury that he suffered against Montreal? Is it an upper body injury that he had? I haven't seen exact play, but I know he got hurt in the last game. But we may not see him this series. And if that's the case, that's a huge win for Florida, and they can definitely play their style and, maybe take this series, because that's how big Patrice Bergeron still is to
Mm-hmm.
this Boston team.
Yeah, and Pavel Zacha coming from the third line to the first. That you have a different matchup, especially with when Barkov's on that line. And I know Barkov hasn't gotten it going yet, but I think Barkov is just ready to just explode. This is an opportunity for Barkov to really explode as the series shifts to FLA Live Arena and having that last change as well. And this goes back to what I want to talk about with
Mm-hmm.
an article that I read today from David Dwork of the Hockey News, and talking about playing with the lead and putting the necessary matchups out there for your defensive guys. And not going to spoil the whole article that David Dwork wrote. I want you guys, the listeners, to go ahead and go read that. But basically talk about how when you have the lead, letting the play come to you and playing the style that you want. And of course, it only took 3 minutes in game one for the Boston Bruins to really control the play and letting the game come to them. And and it was quick for the Panthers in game two to get that lead and not letting down. And of course, they didn't trail at all in game two, but letting the play come to you for this team. And there's a different. I mean, the Panthers couldn't necessarily relax in
No.
game two until later. It took a while until they could be in that mode, but just the difference in mindset when you're able to just stay back and also dictate the pace too. And also with the Panthers only having 3 comeback wins in the regular season, one of them being against Boston, and
Mm-hmm.
the goaltender that's going to play in Florida this time around, he didn't play either of the road games for Boston when they were in Florida during the regular season. So this is a little bit different than what we're about to see come game 3.
Definitely is. And, David wrote a very good article, and I read it just before we came on. And that's a hockey in a nutshell right there. If you grab the lead and you allow the other team to kind of not come at you, but you allow them to come to you, you dictate play then. You basically don't take any chances. You just play really sound defense, and you pick your battles, and you basically create turnovers and create your own chances. On the other side of that too is if the team's constantly coming to you, they're opening up, they're going to make mistakes. So it makes it easier for you then to go in and actually have scoring chances. So if you look at game one, Florida was doing that. Game two, Boston was doing that. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually happens in game three. We know that games in FLA Live Arena kind of go crazy. Weird things can happen. But I do think that whoever does score first will ultimately be the winner of game three.
Yeah, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a crowd, an excited crowd, and hopefully the Panthers will. We know that Boston fans will travel for this game. We know, but hopefully that the Panthers fans can shut them out. Hopefully, no violence, but hopefully that the play on the ice with the Panthers getting that energy and now having the home ice advantage, they can find a way for those Boston fans to just be a little quiet come game 3. So 7:30 TNT with Jim Jackson, Jody Shelley, and Jean-Luc Grandpierre on the call on TNT tomorrow at 7:30 at FLA Live Arena. And it's a big opportunity for the Florida Panthers to maintain that home ice advantage. Is neither of these games, Nick, you can drop. So before we wrap up here, any parting words for the listeners?
It's going to be a long series, guys. Whether Florida wins both of them or, splits here in Florida, just buckle up and get ready for fireworks and everything. And if Florida is able to take a commanding 3-1 lead in this series, they win both games in Florida. I'm almost afraid. It's almost like a dream come true, to be honest, like
Yeah.
that. Like, I don't know what to do with it. So I hope that they would know what to do and they can basically close them out early. It would be probably the biggest upset or the shock of, the decade so far. But let's keep our heads up. The Panthers are playing the right way. And, I think they're in the Bruins' heads right now, which I don't think any other team was able to this whole season. So let's go Panthers, and let's bring home another win.
Let's go. And it all starts Friday night. So Nick, I want to say thank you for joining me on another edition of Fairbanks Friday. Tell the listeners where they can find you online.
Armando, thanks for having me on again. Hopefully I'll be on next Thursday as well. Hopefully we still have a season. But everybody can follow me on Twitter at Prudentia0. But with that, thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick, and I'll see you next week, my friend.
See ya.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers your first listen of the day. And every dayers, we are going to have a special Saturday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, an early morning show. We'll be breaking down Game 3 of the first round series between the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins. So you don't want to miss it. So come back on Saturday morning and we'll give you a full recap of Panthers Bruins Game 3 from FLA Live Arena. So I'm Armando Velez with Nick Fairbanks. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.